Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Hugh Rowland was the epitome of reality TV. Gritty, fearless, and unreservedly authentic. On he was the polar bear of Ice Road Truckers. Bear, ripping through icy roads as like it was simply another day at the workplace. However, beneath all of that, Bluster was a man who had fought all his life, the loneliness, the cold, and the perpetual danger of catastrophe. He wasn't who was the show, not just a character. Thus, when he abruptly disappeared, admirers were kept in suspense as to what transpired. Why would a man who thrived on risk just strolled away? In actuality, Hugh's tale took a dark turn, one that is full of suffering, loss, and the cameras never capture a side of him, captured. And in order to comprehend it, we have to go back in time and see how it all started. Fans are more familiar with Hugh Rowland as the polar bear, established itself as one of the world's hardest truckers. Have you ever watched an Ice Road episode? Opportunities for Truckers on the History Channel. Did you witness him exhibiting some of the greatest? There are harsh paths out there, cold deep lakes, blizzards, and isolated paths in North America's northern wilderness. However, he was a reality, TV star long before folklore. Kelowna is where Hugh's story began, British Columbia. He was born in 1957. Hard work is nothing new to them. When he was 6, he had already begun to steer automobiles on the farm owned by his family. Although, the majority of children were still learning how to ride a bike, and he was settling in, behind, the wheel of large equipment. Such early practical experience established the framework for a lifetime of managing hazardous jobs and large rigs. Grit molded his early years. Living meant chilly winters, lengthy hours, and figuring out how to persevere when circumstances were difficult. That setting established a work ethic that remained with him, thus having the chance to drag supplies via icy roads to isolated. He didn't mind diamonds and gold. Hold on, he was only in his teens. When he was asked if he would like to make a delivering in the north, the salary was decent, superior to anything he had previously seen. Age. And he said yes, without blinking. Hugh Rowland was only 15 years old when he wasn't considering TV or celebrity cameras. He was only a teenager at the time. The territories in the northwest, holding the wheel of a large tractor and transporting cargo across some of the riskiest highways in Canada, specifically ice roads, slick frozen routes that might break free at any time, the types of roadways that didn't give a damn about your age. However, Rowland possessed grit. He wasn't just giving up. Due to the weather or the difficulty of the work was crazy, he enjoyed trucking simply and easy, and he continued because of that love. In 2007, for example, Rowland's dedication was going to get him somewhere he didn't anticipate on across the nation's television screens. In that year, the individuals responsible for the History Ice Road, a reality show on the channel drivers, were sought after by truckers, with actual stories, actual experience, and steely nerves. Rowland looked at each box, but when they initially summoned him, he didn't think any of it was true. He assumed it was a friend playing pranks on him. Ultimately, how frequently does a television network wish to trail a truck driver into the Arctic when they informed him that they want to shoot and install cameras in his trucks? Rowland drove up to Yellowknife, didn't give a lavish welcome. He simply informed them that the highways were closed because the time of year and stated whether they were really. They might give it another go the following year, and they did. After a year, those producers arrived just in front of him, door, prepared to begin. That's when it dawned on him. It wasn't a joke. This was authentic. You would think that someone would seize the opportunity to appear on a popular show. However, Rowland never pursued the spotlight. His attention was on his work, cameras or none at all. He had a lot to haul and expenses to cover. He clarified. He didn't want the movie from the beginning, crew slowing him down and obstructing his pace or tampering with his funds. As far as he was concerned, nobody would like to observe trucks traverse roads that are frozen. According to him, it wasn't really appealing to see drivers face the harsh, cold, honest, barren roads. However, when the cameras began to roll, viewers swiftly disproved him, attracted by the raw combination of grime, peril, and unadulterated survival. Hugh discussed how people didn't fully understand how it was a serious job. The show is as crazy as it seemed. Failed to captivate the entire weight of the risks involved your life outside. He would give a headshake. Time they were referred to as cowboys because it wasn't about seeking thrills for him. It had to do with being mindful of the ice. One incorrect action, and no one will arrive house. When the inaugural season premiered, it first shown on Channel 5 in the UK in early 2008. Around the same time, Australia picked it up, Time on Network, Foxtel, and All-Star in June of that year, 10 joined. By autumn, it was on RTL7 in the Netherlands. Italy arrived with a later. It was shown on the History January 2010 channel under the name. The translation of Gli Eroi del Ghiaccio is Heroes. As soon as it aired, the figures were outrageous. 3.4 million. Because so many people watched, it became history. The largest original hit on the channel in more than 10 years. It was also widely criticized. It was referred to as gripping by others. Others were surprised at the show's depth, how these frequently worn-out drivers yet still pushed. Chilly to the bone through, with only steering a steel nerve and a wheel. Hugh laughed at how they were shown in the program as thrills seeking adventurers when, in reality, it was a work of life or death. He recognized the request. Your seat's edge tension was what drew viewers back. People were addicted, he said. On the risk, that continuous stroll, the line that separates survival from catastrophe, which was the highlight of the show. Make a statement. He had been operating a vehicle on ice years. Although the cash was a bonus, it wasn't the reason he returned. Season. There was more to it. He had something in his blood. However, the work took a toll. Long distances from home, the harsh cold, and the constant danger that any journey could be the final one. However, when the season returned, he was prepared. Each time he departed, he eagerly anticipated the road. Additionally, each and every piece of him missed it when he got home. Already, Hugh had a code of his own when it arrived at the cameras, restrictions on the amount they might enter his universe. In retrospect, his thoughts on everything were a mixture. Not being recognized bothered me. Him. Yet he never tried to get attention. If anything, he would have rather vanished into the throng. He consistently claimed to be a private individual. Yes, he would grin for a picture of someone or sign their autograph if requested, but it never felt quite right. Each time a pen was given to him, he would pause for a moment, wondering, what on earth am I expected to write? However, the grind continued with Hugh when the cameras were switched off. Like a diamond, when gold mines began to appear in the far northern wilderness, the need for as supply increased, so did the need for bold drivers such as Hugh. The task was dangerous, to be sure, but the large salary made it challenging to refuse. Above Hugh was more than just a driver at the time. He was spending money on the actual rigs. When Ice Road Truckers made its premiere on TV, he was already profoundly firmly established in the sector. By that time, Roland was more than a mere chauffeur. He was already quite heavy in that icy world, renowned for his courage and grit. And when these truckers were heard, may receive a wage for a full year. In the few grueling months weren't difficult to find out why men continued to sign up. A few of, according to reports, the seasoned veterans were raking in excess of $100,000 annually. Alluring, correct? However, there was a catch to that money. Each run was a risk. Hugh himself once discussed the uncanny sound of ice breaking under a rig that is completely loaded. It wasn't simply eerie, it was horrifying. That would be heard by some novices, sound and never pass their initial haul. However, Roland had a unique presence that made him unique. When he had an appearance on Ice Road Truckers, swiftly gained popularity among fans, not just for his driving prowess, but also because his dominant demeanor. He was well known by the polar bear, a catchy moniker. Fascinatingly, the name came from. He has a bug deflector on one of his vehicles. However, as viewers learned more about him, the nickname seemed more appropriate. Hugh was big, rough, and had a rough, raw intensity. He even recognized himself as the type of man who wouldn't back down from a brawl, if provoked. Ultimately, the term polar bear defined him. It didn't just stick. When it comes to workplace hazard, few occupations can't compare to what the ice road truckers encounter each and every winter. Imagine it. Huge rolling across ice lakes in 18-wheelers in the Canadian bush, with cargo weighing tens of thousands of pounds as the temperature drops to a -60. It's a constant, not simply a job, balancing act between a paycheck and danger. The excitement is ingrained in each that slippery roads for a mile. However, the danger. And viewers are unable to see that part. Pull their eyes away. In the center of this realm of huge stakes is Hugh Rowland, a longtime ice roads veteran. Experienced for a lifetime and more tales that most people couldn't endure hearing. Rowland exposes the harsh truth in On Thin Ice, his book. He starts off with a sobering fact. Nobody whose vehicle has traversed the ice has always been preserved. This sobering reality establishes the tone, but the darkness deepens. Rowland has lost 35 family members and friends to the harsh landscape. Figures such as that don't only draw attention to the danger, they interpret what danger actually means. Rowland isn't here merely to startle, though. He holds the frozen in the highest regard. Roads he's been on for many years. He claims that the majority of catastrophes occurred as a result of someone not either driving or paying attention quick. His window is constantly down, even in the bitterly cold weather, just so he'able to hear the ice. Because in his opinion, that shifting and cracking is the road chat. And you don't pay attention, you could be completely engulfed by the ice. He distributed to a single source that he's basically frozen every portion for years of his physique. Fingers that are blackened, cheeks that were frostbitten, even after 3 days buried in snow, stuck in his truck, at temperatures down to 60 degrees below zero. Being harsh isn't necessary for survival. It's regarding your regard for the cold. In just a few minutes, hypothermia may develop. Frostbite and organ failure aren't abstract risks. They never change. Portion of the formula. Additionally, there's a science to get by in the wild. Rowland outlined how the ice only provides support for a lot of weight, and movement is key. Although a truck may be permitted to transport 100,000 pounds when operating a vehicle, if it stops, that weight falls to 60,000. Why? A truck begins to press when it stops, directly downward, and the ice beneath has no means of redistributing the strain. Put an end to, it's like punching a hole if it's too lengthy, across the floor. Additionally, after a rig goes, it's gone under. New drivers frequently discover the hard way. Some people hear the ice breaking under their wheels and frozen, terrified, and immobilized. Rowland states they must be dragged out of the lake and returned since hesitancy is a one-way pass to catastrophe. His counsel, never stop moving. As soon as you quit, you are risking everything. Although, the show placed a lot of emphasis on fierce Rowland, didn't share that competition viewpoint. He didn't see it as a spectacular collision between the drivers. It was just a job. A taxing 24-hour workday, where the goal was to transport as many cargo as feasible before to the roads being blocked for the season. This is probably not going to be a startling someone accustomed to reality television. A large portion of the content is designed for drama, using video editing to intensify stress and foster a more competitive environment. Although the program depicted winners and losers that are obvious, Rowland argued that the majority of drivers weren't centered on any of those things. Their objective was simple. Do the task at hand, not pursue notoriety or fantasy awards. And let's face it, perhaps fortunately, they weren't racing one another. These drivers had previously sufficient workload, navigating enormous rigs through freezing lakes and over conditions of whiteout, including a genuine competition for that blend, may have simply made worse. In relation to drama and dynamics, if you observed the initial seasons, you most likely observed that it was a primarily male crew. Lisa Kelly failed not appear until the 3rd season. Rowland had a hypothesis regarding that. He assumed the producers could have led her in part to steer things up, and perhaps even bring in a few additional watchers. Additionally, as Roland occasionally spoke as though Lisa was still in reality, learning the ropes was a little distinct. Lisa was already hauling during several years at Carrile Transportation prior to her even showing up on film. She additionally stated on David Letterman that she had 7 years of transportation experience by so. During interviews, Roland provided her credit for raising awareness of the display. According to him, the producers were putting her on tape, demonstrating her confront the large hallways, and believed she'd develop into a competent small truck driver. However, his tone occasionally gave the impression that, as though he believed, her primary function was more about attracting more views than a serious trucker. However, over time, Lisa demonstrated differently, driving the same harsh roads like the others, and so on starring in the deadliest spin-off roads, adopting perilous paths in South America and India. If someone had, she put her doubts to rest. Rowland's. The show's journey wasn't without its difficulties. He openly talked about some of the more difficult times, especially in terms of leading his group. In a conversation with Joshua Nanny, a YouTuber, Rowland described how the filming process started to affect his company. Prior to the cameras, he trusted his guys and rolled. However, once they were the center of attention, changed. His drivers used to be preoccupied with the labor, started to yearn for recognition and fame. Ultimately, Rowland took the challenging choice to fire each and every among them. Even if they left, the program kept concentrating on such previous drivers. As Rowland silently recruited new members and went back to Thegrind over time, the cameras said disappeared into the distance unless we were filming something important. He hardly acknowledged their existence, instead focusing on the task at hand. Rowland continued to play a key role during 8 seasons of the show, turning into a mainstay and even showing up in some spin-offs. But in 2014, he suddenly vanished from the series. It wasn't an issue of creative disparities or early retirement. What really made him turn away? There was a major car accident from the ice. That completely changed his life. When the accident occurred, Rowland wasn't even operating a vehicle. He was riding shotgun. Although Will, one of the show's producers, it was Morrison who drove. Court records indicate that Morrison lost control and collided with a group of trees beside a road in Canada. Rowland ultimately brought a case against him, asserting that Morrison was operating a vehicle carelessly. However, the mishap didn't just cause a couple of bruises. It led to serious injuries to Rowland's lower body. According to him, such wounds were so bad that they took away his capacity to drive trucks for a living, basically ending a profession that he had dedicated his life in general. However, the litigation continued at injuries that end a career. Rowland as well demonstrated that the mishap had taken impact on his private life, particularly his union. He asserted that the injury impacted his closeness to his wife, as well as the mental and physical fallout had caused major issues at House. The news was picked up by TMZ, which reported on how Rowland attributed the collision to not only for ruining his career, but for destroying one of the most intimate areas of his existence. Regarding Rowland's feelings regarding ice road truckers today, surprisingly, he never paid any attention to even when he was the main character. In a previous YouTube interview, Rowland acknowledged that he had only viewed perhaps 3 episodes, all from advertising, just as the show was ending the ground. His relatives and friends on then, nonetheless, were ardent supporters and consistently questioned him about certain show moments. However, Rowland claimed he didn't particularly like observing himself on television. Additionally, because he didn't feel compelled to live it. Watch it again on screen. Since departing, Rowland has withdrawn from the show spotlight and changed his attention. He's been putting all of his effort into his building industry and increasing expenditures, spending time with his family. Additionally, despite everything that has happened to him, he's still achieved financial success. 64 years old, he is said to be valued about $2 million, which makes him the cast's richest participant in the history of ice road truckers. It's a new type of road. However, Rowland continues to chart his own path.